of California yards have citrus for one reason or another. So today I want to cover quite a lot of things. I'll try to hurry since help is late. The climate here and your particular microclimate is really crucial to citrus trees. Where you plant them in the yard can have a really big impact. The type of soil you have and how much moisture it will hold, as well as how often you have to irrigate. The size of mature trees. This is one of those really confusing things. They always have on the label dwarf, semi-dwarf, and they'll tell you it gets 8 feet high, but not necessarily true. Once we talk about selecting a citrus tree that's appropriate for your situation, then we'll talk about how to care for it. How do you plant it? What does it need after that? What irrigation? Do you need to prune it and why? And then the best part, harvest. How do you know your fruit's ripe when you harvest? And then there's some things that I see fairly often that are like the common citrus problems in our area. So I just want to touch on those a little bit so that you'll know what you're looking at. So why is selection so important in all trees, but particularly in citrus? The main reason selection is important is because you can avoid so many problems by selecting the correct plant. The bottom picture there is frost damage. So if you select a frost-tolerant plant, then you won't come out the next morning and see this wilted up little tree. The top picture is a picture of a tree that is Phytophthora resistant on the right and one that is not on the left. If you're planting more than one citrus tree or you have the Phytophthora root rot in the soil in your area, you want to be really careful what you plant there. And that's the difference between what you get. Another reason that selection is important is because if you select the right plant, you can be successful. You can have a healthy, vigorous growing tree, not one that sits there and looks like it never grows. That's really disappointing for just about every gardener to have something that doesn't grow. And fruit. Select the wrong tree, care for it in the wrong way, and you don't get any fruit at all. Look at the difference here between the smaller tree on the right is just loaded with lemons, and the one on the left, not a single one. So selection. Now, before you go picking a tree, you want to know your fruit. So I like to tell everybody, have a taste test. Go to the grocery store, buy every one you're interested in, and test it. And then there's some basic things you need to know. The oranges here on the right, the one on the right is a Valencia orange. They are fantastic, but they are considered juice makers. Everybody that grows Valencia grows them to juice them, because they are just chock full of seeds. Whereas the navel orange, on the left there, not a single seed. So that's known as something that we would eat right off of the tree. So do your research, know what you're getting before you get to the nursery, because then it gets overwhelming. The climate here in Lincoln, you're zone 9. That's considered a really good growing area for citrus, with the exception of the few little frosts that we get. Most of the time we're perfect, and then every once in a while we get a frost. So zone 9 is what you're looking at, and that'll work for most citrus trees. Grapefruits might be a little difficult, and sweet lime, because they really like to be hot. So if you're going to get one of those trees that can't take a frost at all or needs heat to produce fruit, then you have to look at your microclimate. What can you do to enhance your area to grow a tree that might be marginal here? One of the main things you can do is like on the top right there. That is a grapefruit tree, and it is planted right at the edge of the driveway because that driveway will absorb heat and reflect it back. Grapefruit will not ripen their fruit if they don't have enough heat. So in this situation, this is going to work. They're going to get fruit. The driveway's going to collect all that heat and send it up to the tree, and the fruit will ripen. The size of trees. Standard citrus. If you buy a citrus tree, and you know nothing about it, you're going to get a 30-foot tree. It's about 20 feet wide. A lot of the time, depending on the rootstock on your tree, you're still going to get a 30-foot tree no matter what they put on the label. So it's really important to look at rootstock from a perspective of what am I going to get with this rootstock. Most of the time, I've been to the local nurseries over the last 2 weeks trying to prepare to be here and tell you what I found. Almost every nursery is selling what they're calling dwarf and semi-dwarf. And they're saying that those trees are going to be 8 to 12 feet high. Well, when you call the grower, because citrus is not required to have a rootstock label on it, it can tell you just what the top of the tree is and not the rootstock. So I look up the grower, I call them up, I say, I have a tree right here, what rootstock is it on? And they'll tell you. And everyone I called, which was 4 different growers, they were on semi-dwarfing rootstock, but the labels all said they would be 8 to 10 feet high. So maybe if you're doing a lot of pruning. Soil. Now you guys, I think, have kind of sandy soil. Is that right now? No.
Rocks clay.
So I'm going to gather that you all know how to tell the difference between a heavy clay soil and a nice sandy soil. It's really important in terms of what the soil can do for your plant and how to irrigate in terms of knowing what your soil is. This is a perfect storm right here. This is a drought-tolerant tree, which is fantastic for all that reflected heat coming off of the pavement there. In a container, it's perfect. It's not going to get over-irrigated. Everything's great except for the soil. It's a heavy clay soil. They put in a drought-tolerant tree. It doesn't like to be wet at all. So this is what you get when you do it wrong. Okay, so we've analyzed our situation. We know where we're going to plant our tree. We know what the conditions are. We know what our soil is. So the next step is to choose a rootstock. And the rootstocks are very specific. I have a handout that has so many different categories on it, it's overwhelming to look at. But for the most part, your rootstocks are either going to be tolerant of heavy clay soil and wet conditions or intolerant, and susceptible to root rot or not susceptible to root rot. Those are the most important things for you guys. So this picture here is one of the main rootstocks that we have around here. And it's called the Flying Dragon Trifoliate Orange. And if you look really carefully at the picture of the twig, it looks like it has little dragons coming out both sides. That's why they call it that. But you can see that what you get off that plant is golf ball sized, little, very heavily seeded fruits. So you want to select your rootstock for your climate and microclimate and for the size of your planting space. If you're selecting a rootstock that gets to be a full-size tree and you're going to put it in a little 3-foot planter, that's not a good choice. So be careful with the rootstock. The rootstock will have an impact on the top of the tree. Some of them will make them smaller, some of them will make them larger. And then of course, I already mentioned you're selecting for soil type. So these are the 2 rootstocks that are most prevalent. If you go to Green Acres or Isley Nursery or even Home Depot, what you're going to get most likely is the C35 or the Trifoliate Orange. The C35 in heavy soil is really not a good choice. It just rots and it kills the tree and it sits there and it never grows and you don't know what's happening. Then all of a sudden it dies. So heavy soil, you don't want the C35. That's why you can call it check. but the trifoliate orange will do perfect in those heavy soils, and it'll produce a really good tree. There's other considerations with rootstock. Hopefully they'll be on the handout that I gave you. And one of them is the C35 doesn't do well with navel oranges. It makes the top of the tree produce less fruit, and the quality is not as good. So depending on your rootstock and what they put on top of it, there's an incompatibility factor. So on the handout I gave you, it will tell you for each rootstock what's compatible, what's incompatible is what it has on there. Most of the time you won't have to worry about that because the growers are pretty good about not putting together things that don't work because they also want to be successful. But it's good to be knowledgeable and know what you're getting. So we've been through selecting our tree and our rootstock, and now we're going to go to the nursery and we're going to select our specific tree. When you get to the nursery, they have so many things, it's so overwhelming, but there's a few universal things that you're going to look for both in landscape trees and shrubs and in citrus. So for citrus, one of the most important things is you want to make sure that the foliage that you're seeing on the tree is above the graft. If you're having foliage come from beneath the graft, you're getting, like the flying dragon, the little golf ball-sized fruits full of seeds. That's no good. So make sure that you know where the graft is and that all the foliage is on top of the graft. You also want to make sure that you're looking for nice, green, fresh, perfect leaves. You don't need to buy a tree that doesn't have perfect leaves. You can always select another one or go to a different nursery. Most of the time, the leaf condition can tell you a lot about the tree, particularly in citrus. And so you want to make sure you're starting with something that's perfect. No curling, no discoloration, no green veins, yellow leaves, nothing. You want to make sure you get the right stuff. Visible insect damage, that just means that that insect is probably hiding somewhere on that tree and you're going to bring it home with you. So be real careful not to get anything where you can actually see any insects or insect damage. Mechanical damage, not the end of the world. They do tend to heal, but the one thing I would say about mechanical damage is that if it's at ground level, it can be a death sentence for the tree. This picture here, there is some mechanical damage that's up just like an inch, but there's also one that's at ground level. The problem is that the soil has so much stuff in it and it holds moisture and it just creates this environment right to the inside of the tree that they get diseased, they get insects, and they rot really easily. So no mechanical damage if possible. Here's just another photo of a graft. Now this one, instead of running vertically, this one runs horizontally. It's the way that they grafted the tree together and created a different scar. And again, below the fingernail there, that's a limb coming out from below the graft, so it's going to have bad fruit, and you're going to want to cut that off. On the right there, one of the ways that you can sometimes tell that you're getting rootstock growth is that most of the fruit now, they have bred out a lot of the thorns. So when you look at that shoot on the right, you have those big nasty thorns coming out of it. So if you have a nice citrus tree and you don't notice any thorns at all, and then you notice one shoot coming right up through the middle that has thorns, follow it back down to where it originates, and you're probably going to find that it's below the graft.
If it isn't below the graft, you should cut it off anyway?
Not necessarily, but if you have a tree that has no thorns and then it just has one branch with thorns on it, I'd cut it off just because I wouldn't want to get poked. Another picture of the graft. This is a more like a bench graft. And I know what that rootstock is just by looking at those leaves. That looks like trifoliate orange. You can see if you look carefully at the second leaf that's closest to the trunk, there's a big thorn sticking out behind that. But yeah, they turn to sprout like that. So cut them off. Okay, so we're there at the nursery, we're selecting our tree. One of the things that really makes people nervous when I'm at the nursery is I'm always pulling the plants out of the containers. And they're like, why do you do that? Well, I want to see what those roots are. You know, that's half of the tree. You can see nice foliage. What if you have bad roots? How will you know unless you check? So pull that container out. Look at that soil. When you pull it out, it should look just like these two. You should have nice, fresh little roots all the way around without them being a mat, and all the dirt should stay together. You shouldn't pull that container out and have all the dirt fall away. Because when the dirt falls away, what that really means is that they took a plant that was in a smaller container and they put it in a larger container, and they're going to charge you for the larger container. But that tree hasn't grown to that size yet. It hasn't rooted into that container. So you should be paying for the smaller size. And that's illustrated here on the right. You can see the square container that was there, and the tree hasn't grown into that larger container yet. It can be a significant amount of money. When you go from a 5-gallon container that's, you know, maybe 50 or 70 bucks to a 15, now it's 150 bucks. That's a lot of money to pay for something if it isn't right. The other thing you don't ever want to see, and this is really over-exaggerated, but when your roots start curling around the container, roots grow from the outside out. So eventually, they're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger towards the inside too. And they're going to end up squeezing that tree, like having a rubber band around your wrist that just gets tighter and tighter and tighter every year. So make sure that when you pull your tree out of the container to look at the roots, that it doesn't have any big roots circling around. In the event that there's one and you feel like it's kind of comfortable, that's fine, just cut it off. Don't plant it in the ground like that. Most trees will recover from a little bit of a circling root as long as they're cut. You really don't want to bring diseases or pests home with you. So again, you're looking for stuff that is clean and perfect. And just a quick note, the top left picture there is the Asian citrus psyllid. It's not here yet, but if you ever see it reported immediately, it's going to kill a lot of citrus in California, and they're trying really hard to quarantine it. So I've provided a handout for that. I want you all to be aware that it could be coming. And nurseries transfer plants all the time. And they're really careful, and they try really hard not to transfer diseases or insects, but it does happen. So you as the consumer, the more you know about what it looks like and what you're looking at, the better informed we all can be about where the citrus psyllid is and how to stop it. So the next thing that you look at your tree in the nursery is the form the tree has. Now, form is kind of in the eye of the beholder. It can be beautiful either way. So you can pick the tree that looks good to you, with one exception. We don't ever want to be picking something that has really narrow angle attachments, like the picture on the left here, because when those two stems grow together, they're going to be weak. That's a weak attachment. So you get heavy fruit loads on both of them, and they're going to split out and fall apart, and then it's going to be really disappointing. You're going to go out one morning to harvest your fruit, and the branches are going to be laying on the ground. So select fruit with no narrow angles, nice wide angles out from the main stem on the limbs. Okay, so we've selected our plant, we've got it home, and now it's time to care for it. So let's talk a little bit about how to plant your citrus tree, and then how to deal with irrigating your soil and the soil fertility. Citrus are really heavy feeders, so they really need to have a lot of good organic stuff in the soil and a lot of nutrients to be effective at producing good fruit. And then we'll